Hi everybody, welcome to our lecture for Chapter 6, which is our Financial Concerns with Budgeting for Personnel. In all honesty, this is my absolute favorite chapter in the textbook. This is what I'm most interested in when we're talking about what makes schools work and really how we hire people. I think it's fascinating. I think it's important to look at the cost of retentions that are involved in hiring decisions that we make and how we recruit and select staff. So I think there's a lot of really good stuff that we're going to talk about here, and I think you're going to find this chapter particularly interesting. I might go a little longer with this chapter, honestly, just because I like it so much, but I think it's a great chapter, and I think you're going to get a lot of really good and really pertinent information out of it. So I do hope you watch the full video and you take some notes too, because this is really where most of my work is in and what I have the most experience with in education. So I think this chapter could stand on its own. It doesn't need to be included in the textbook. You've had human resources courses, but taking this in consideration with school finance is important. If you have any questions regarding hiring, succession planning, any of this, this is what I've been doing for the last 10 years of my life. And I would love to help you, and I would love to answer any concerns or questions that you have, because this really is my biggest passion in schools, is seeing how we hire people and the decisions that are made to do staffing. When you hire somebody, the most important decisions you make are on personnel. If you don't have good people, you can't teach and you can't improve schools. Your goal as a building principal, if that's the direction you're going in, is to find the right teachers and hire the right people. Florida is an interesting state in terms of how personnel is found here, because it's not a state that desperately needs teachers, but it's not a state that has a surplus of teachers. Florida's kind of in the middle of the pack. I lived in Pennsylvania, and I worked at a state that it was pretty difficult to get a teaching job in Pennsylvania. The neighbor next door in Ohio was the toughest state in the United States to find a teaching job. There is no state harder to get a teaching job than Ohio. And then right next to us was West Virginia, which all you basically have to do is have a certification and be a body, and you're probably going to find a teaching job in West Virginia. It wasn't that competitive. Now I'm living in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is pretty easy to get a teaching job as well. Not necessarily in elementary and early childhood. It's very competitive in that field, but in high school, you can have a high school job pretty much anywhere that you want to look. So the landscape of this in hiring people in Florida, it's going to be more competitive, and those decisions are critical. And I can't stress that enough. This is a state where it takes work for a principal to find good teachers, but there are a supply of teachers available, which is a good thing. So our book looks at this fiscally, and it says that anything related to personnel has to deal more or less with wages, salaries, and benefits. All districts have these costs, and they depend on the amount of experience that people have, the contract that was previously agreed upon, and a salary schedule. Everybody gets paid. Your custodians, your mechanics, your maintenance people, you as the building principal, you should be making more money than your teachers. I know in some districts in this state, some teachers aren't making more money than the principals, which surprises me, but that happens everywhere. But you have to make sure that you have a strategic plan and you know what it's going to look like working with those personnel. So the main tasks that you're going to be looking at, and we're going to discuss them, are staffing needs, recruitment and retention, how we develop competencies, assigning and using our staff efficiently, making them happy in their job, and giving them clear expectations. So the biggest idea, and I think one of the biggest takeaway messages from anything that I'm going to talk about, is that enrollment drives staffing, and staffing doesn't necessarily drive enrollment. So take a minute and think about that. If you know that you're going to have a massive growth in your school district in the next 10 years, and there's a lot of places in Florida that are experiencing this. If you're looking more northeastern Florida than central Florida, their staffing right now is going the exact reverse. They have too many teachers and not enough students, where most of central Florida, it's the exact opposite. It's growing. So you have to be aware of this, and you have to know what your enrollment is, not only now but in the future as well. It's why in the demographic paper assignment I really stress this idea of understanding your enrollment, knowing how many people are going to be in your districts. And in reading those papers, it was interesting to find, those of you that were in charter or magnet schools, your enrollment is pretty fixed, and it's based on space and availability and accommodations for students. You have to know this stuff, and this has to be the biggest part of your budget. In a lot of ways, one of the good things about Florida in terms of site-based management is the fact that you do have control over this. Because some of you are in districts that have 100, 200 schools, you have more control than somebody that's in a smaller county with a smaller district. So keep that in mind, because some of the counties here, like Orange and Polk, you're going to be able to determine the staffing needs, and you have control and autonomy over them. Where a place like Flagler, most of it can be done at the district level because it just makes sense to do it at the district level. Nothing is more important than recruiting. It's the most important thing you do as a building principal. If you want your time to be spent doing things that aren't helping teachers get better or fixing problems that exist, recruit the right people. Be proactive and be quick. If you can't pay somebody a certain amount of money, show them that you care about them, show them that you're interested in them, and then you're most likely to get them. Work with colleges to find people. If you have a good student teacher, why would you not hire them right away and hire them immediately? Offer them a position right away. Tell them, you can come work in our school. We have opportunities for you. Things are available. And it's going to give you the opportunities that you need as a principal to not invest your time in these types of matters if you pick the right people. When you have a teacher hired, you have to find ways for them to improve individually. You want your teachers to do well, but unfortunately, training and development costs money. You want to individualize training and development and professional development so that everybody gets the same, but the honest to God truth is that you are not going to be able to do this. This itself, it just isn't going to work for every single teacher in your building unless you're in a smaller building or a smaller school district. We want individualized professional development, but we're not going to be able to get it. So professional development in terms of a financial cost, the cost outweighs the benefits of individualizing professional development in most circumstances. The next important thing that you have to do is staff accordingly and build your master schedule accordingly. There are going to be certain classes that you have to schedule first and build every single thing else around. The key thing in most school districts are your specials. These are your band classes, your chorus classes. If you're doing AP US History or AP English in most districts there's 2 or 3 sections, but something like AP Civics and Government, AP Art History, you might only have 1 section of those, so schedule specials around those. That's what has to come first, and that helps you get the effective classroom environment that you want. Your specials and your ones that are going to affect the largest majority of populations must be scheduled first. If you're doing something at the high school level, try to give teachers back-to-back work when possible. After you fit everything into your singletons, then you move into what comes next, your subject areas, so that people aren't switching their preps. So you have to make sure that you're improving staff satisfaction where possible. To get people happy, you need to do this through mentoring right when they first come into the profession. That costs money, but the other thing that costs money is you improve teacher morale through a pay. But if you can motivate somebody internally by giving them trinkets, telling them good job, giving them certificates, that can help and that can improve the standing in the organization as well. So I agree with that. Everything has to be clear in terms of how performance evaluation is done and when it's going to be done and how it's going to be accomplished. This is not a supervision of curriculum class, but you have to understand that everything involves money, and if you look at the perspective that I've tried to present so far in this class, time is money. So having a clear pattern on how you're going to evaluate teachers is huge, because it has to be done in a way that it's not wasting your time so that you can commit your resources to other things as a building leader. Building relationships helps. You want to do that to keep people. And that notion of mentoring right in the beginning and giving them a proper induction and a proper experience is going to be what matters the most. So right now, I'm actually finishing a study in Pennsylvania looking at districts where it's impossible to find a teaching job. One district in particular had 106 applicants for one job. I'm finding ways that we use the recruitment methods to get the best and the brightest, and what works in ways to retain those people and to keep them there. One of the things that I found is that the interview process itself it costs administrators time because they're doing it at the end of the school year if they're doing it properly, and they're doing it while the school year is supposed to be wrapping up. But when they do it correctly, and they're doing it in May and they're doing it in June, they're getting the best and the brightest, they're keeping them, and they're able to offer them jobs, and they're able to offer them stuff that may stick. So what are the key ideas of recruitment and selection? We're going to go over each one of these individually so that we have a good understanding of them. So role expectations, I think you have the responsibility as a building leader to tell people exactly what they're getting into. If they're getting into a high needs position, a position that's going to have an overcrowded class because you can't recruit enough people to teach in that subject area, you need to be open and honest about that and have those conversations up front. And if you don't have those conversations up front, we can have problems because then somebody's going to leave. You've already invested time and training and development into them, and then they're going to leave somewhere else to get something that potentially could benefit them and potentially looks better. So you need to make sure that the qualifications that somebody possesses fits the role that they're supposed to be doing. I think you do this as a team, and you do this prior to positions ever even being posted. That way it's clear. If you know somebody's leaving a position, try to look at what they've done right and how they've built the position, because then you can build the next person that comes in around that. And that relates more to this notion of strategic planning. This is all hiring, and as I keep saying, hiring is valuable, and time is money in your school systems. So if you are doing a massive screener through district human resources, you get together, the district level will do this, and then they'll funnel this stuff down to the building level, and they'll make sure that the building level people have an understanding of what's going on. One interview only does so much. That's why having multiple interviews for positions is a good thing. One of the counties that I'm working with right now in Florida, we're really looking at this idea that principals should have more than 2 interviews. They should have a screener interview, they should have another interview where they actually get to talk to people that are on site, they should have a district interview, and they should have an open forum to interact with people. If the principal really is the most important person in the building in training and motivating and teaching staff, then shouldn't you invest more time in giving them an appropriate induction as to what the building is supposed to look like? I would say the same as with a teacher. A teacher should know what they're doing, and they should know what they're getting into before they take a position. It's only fair to them. If you are a building leader, you should know what the role expectations are based off of. Think about whether or not the person is going to fit in with the culture of the building and the culture of the district. I think that's huge, because if you have somebody that's young, motivated, and a bright go-getter, and they're walking into a building that has veteran teachers who have run out previous young principals, don't stick that young go-getter in as a new principal. It's not going to work. Be open and honest, figure out what the culture is first, and fill the position around it, because if you don't, you're going to have to replace them, and replacing them is going to cost money, and we're trying to avoid that. All interview responses should have a clear criteria and a rating procedure. Everything should have a standardized form that you have determined at the building level or the district level that says whether or not somebody would be a good fit. This is not a law class, but if this were a law class, you would realize that if you don't follow the law and follow the protocol and procedure, then you could get sued, which also will cost the district money, and we don't want that to happen. You want to hire early in the school year if you can for your teachers, and you want to let them see the building. You want to let them walk around and see what they're getting into. So that way they can see themselves teaching into it and start preparing. So compensation policies and procedures. Money is important for teachers. People in Ohio are constantly trying to get into Pennsylvania to find teaching jobs in Pennsylvania because they're not compensated much in Ohio until they're at the end stages of their career. Florida, there's not much trajectories here. I mean, people want to be in Florida, and the compensation is pretty consistent across the state, which has its advantages and negatives. In Oklahoma, people are trying to leave and go to Texas almost immediately. So you have to be open about compensation, and if compensation isn't good, show what the other benefits are and be very, very, very open about those and give those higher credence so that people say, I want to work here because I can get X, Y, and Z as a benefit. So once an individual is hired, you want to place them where they're going to be the most successful. If you have a K-5 teacher that's certified and they want to be an upper elementary school teacher, give them the chance to be successful. When I worked in elementary schools, I related better to the 3rd and 4th graders. I was in a P4 building. The preschool and kindergarten was not an area that I was comfortable with. But for me, I like to stick with the upper elementary grades. It gave me a chance to be successful, and it worked for me. If you know that you have a teacher that doesn't fit in preschool, don't put them in preschool. It's a no-brainer. You want to retain people because the cost of replacement is so much more than the cost of just putting them in the right place in the beginning. So most of the time, you can't control pay structure. You can determine as a building principal how much an employee gets paid over years of experience. That is an area where you do have flexibility in most school districts. Try to equalize based on what they were paid at their previous district when you're giving them years of service. This at least gives them confidence, tells them that you care about them, you respect their experience they had somewhere else, but you really have no control over pay. This is done more district level, or in some cases it's done at the state level. So personnel development, there are 6 elements that are important with it that are tied with retention, and we're going to go over each one of these. So number 1, mentor programs in inducting new staff into the district. You want to save teachers, you want to keep teachers in the positions, you need to be involved in the induction program. Because if you show them what the district can offer them and you show that you're willing to work with them and you have an open door, it's going to increase their job satisfaction and they're not going to leave. People leave districts if they feel like they haven't been given a proper mentoring or proper induction program. It's directly correlated with whether or not people stay in the profession or not. There's plenty of research that's been done on this, and it's something that you can look on that maybe some of you are even doing for your dissertations. Once again, you staff around what you need to staff. At the elementary and middle level, you have tons of flexibility with staffing because of certification areas. If somebody's an elementary school teacher and your building is an elementary building, you can staff appropriately. High school level, it's based on the courses you offer, the certifications they have, and when things are going to run. Once again, you have to think about your singleton courses. If you have somebody that is so highly specialized and you have smart kids in your district and they're the only person that can teach AP BC calculus, and you're only going to have one section of that, you need to build your staffing around that person. It's the same with your choir teacher or your band teacher, where they're only running it for one period of the day, and it's 10th to 12th grade band or 9th to 12th grade choir. Everything is built around those program needs. So assign staff accordingly and make sure that they get the support that they need. You have to orient them. You have to give them time to see what other buildings look like, see what other districts look like. I like the idea of hiring your best and brightest student teachers, but from a teacher perspective, you don't get to see what other districts look like. You haven't seen other perspectives, which is not a good thing. It's great to see the way systems work in multiple locations. And you do this through orientation. If you have a good mentoring program, you're going to let your teachers see other buildings and other districts. First 3 years, it is a smart idea to meet with a classroom teacher once a month in their classroom, or meet with a principal once a month in their office. I like the idea of the teacher being approached by the principal and the principal reaching out and trying to help them in their environment rather than the principal making the teacher come to their office. I think that's a big idea and it can alleviate a lot of stress and anxiety from people. First 3 years, this is important, and it shows that you're going to give the people ongoing support they need to be successful. So we've already talked about objective-based performance